Robert Pondiscio, a senior fellow here at the American Enterprise Institute. And I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Hidden Beliefs That Shape Your Students, an Introduction to Primal World Beliefs. Today's topic might strike some as a bit outside the usual terrain of education policy, but I suspect by the end of this hour, you will agree with me that it belongs squarely within it. I first encountered Dr. Jeremy Clifton's work a few years ago while reporting and writing an essay for Commentary Magazine that was titled The Unbearable Bleakness of Schooling. That piece explored what I saw as a growing trend in American education, particularly in curriculum and school culture, to portray the world to students as overwhelmingly bleak, broken, unsafe. From the content of young adult literature to action civics to trauma-informed pedagogy, it seemed increasingly common that schools would offer students not just a clear-eyed view of the world, but an overwhelmingly negative one. In reporting for that article, I came across Jeremy Clifton's research on primal world beliefs, what he and his colleagues call primals for short. These are our subconscious baseline beliefs about the nature of the world. Is it safe or dangerous, enticing or dull, alive or mechanistic? Now, I want to be clear up front, Dr. Clifton is not a K-12 researcher, and he's making no claims today about schools, curriculum, or education policy. His work is in the realm of psychology, not pedagogy. But as soon as I began reading his research, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had a lot to say to those of us who do work in K-12 education, even if only by implication, particularly as we increasingly and appropriately grow concerned about the mental health crisis affecting children and our role in addressing it. The core insight of Dr. Clifton's work is both simple and profound. The way that people see the world, their primals, profoundly influences their well-being, resilience, and ability to flourish. And contrary to what you might assume, these beliefs don't seem to be shaped by life experience. Rather, it's the beliefs themselves that shape how we interpret our experiences. This is original work, and it's counterintuitive. And I think it has the potential to reframe how we think about everything from curriculum and school climate to the rise of social emotional learning and trauma-informed practice. In a moment, Jer Clifton will walk us through his research, but I hope today's conversation will also prompt us as educators to reflect on the messages that we send implicitly and explicitly about the nature of the world and young people's place in it. If we take seriously the idea that our beliefs about the world shape mental health, then it follows that schools might have more influence than we realize, not just over what students know, but how they see. So with that, let me introduce our guest. Dr. Jeremy Clifton is a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania and the director of the Primals Project. He earned his PhD in positive psychology from Penn, and he's the lead author on the foundational research identifying and categorizing primal world beliefs. His work has been featured in Psychology Today and NPR's Hidden Brain and elsewhere. Jer Clifton, we are thrilled to have you with us, and we're going to start by asking you to give us a presentation on your work, after which we'll have a Q&A and open it to audience questions. So Dr. Clifton, the floor is yours.
Robert, thank you so much. I will go ahead and share my screen to get this going. Can you see that, sir? Great. Robert, it's a thrill to be here. So I have a few comments before I get going. The first one is, just so you all know, you will be subjected today to a stutter. So I grew up with a stutter. It's why I'm called Jer and not Jeremy, which is my full name. I used to hate to meet people because I would get stuck on my name. And they would think I'm making some kind of joke or something. And I'm like, no, I'm actually funny. That's an awful joke just to mispronounce your name. And so I used to hate to meet people. My first day in college, I was shaking someone's hand as I said my name and I got stuck. And that's the worst because then you're just shaking and shaking and shaking. And the guy cut me off and said, Jared, that's a good name. And I was like, great idea. And so since then I've been Jer. So there's like this hard mark between everyone who knew me before that calls me Jeremy, and people who come after that call me Jer. So I wanted to give you a heads up that I will stutter, and I am grateful for your patience, and together we will get through it. Also, Robert, I'm grateful that I can see you. Please pretend to laugh at all my jokes, so I feel good about myself, and it'll help keep me engaged. And so we can enjoy this time together. I am thrilled to chat with you today. I rarely give non-nerd talks these days. And so you will have to forgive me. I might use lingo. I might use different terms. And Robert, like, feel free to interrupt if something is unclear. Um, and the reason why my stuff went viral about 2.5 years ago. This field is very new. We're learning a lot very quickly, and I didn't feel like it was ready. So I've been saying no to all media interviews since then. Um, and this is a big exception in talking to Robert because Robert has convinced me that primals have important implications for education. So I see my job today as giving you an introduction enough so we can start to speculate together about how we might explore implications in the future. So with that, Robert, thanks for giving me this platform today. Okay, so this talk, the hidden beliefs that shape your students, an introduction to primals. So in psychology, we're trying to explain a whole range of good things. You might have up there grades and school in engagement. There's a whole bunch of things that we're trying to figure out where they come from and how they work. You can think of all of these as puzzles. The claim of primal world belief research is that they represent not even like a piece of a whole bunch of different puzzles, but perhaps a whole section. I don't know, Robert, if you grew up doing puzzles, but it's exciting when you start to link together sections. You know, you've put together these and you've put together these, and then you link them up, and you're like, oh my goodness, like now it's beginning to come together. And what has excited so many people about primals research and why it's getting so much attention within the field is because it's linking up. It's a substantial piece of many different puzzles. At the same time, that means it's not the only piece. It's related to things like depression, and things like success and whatnot. But no one should go away from this thinking that the only thing that matters are primal world beliefs. It is a piece or a section of many different puzzles, or at least that is the claim. So today I'm going to talk a bit about why world beliefs matter, what we discovered in 2019 with the first big paper. I'm going to introduce you to the beliefs themselves and some key non-education related findings so you get a bit of the lay of the land. And then I'm going to speculate briefly about how areas of relevance that I see. And then we'll have some discussion, and we have time. I have maybe 60 seconds worth of closing remarks. So to start, I want everyone to imagine a time, not when anything bad actually occurred. I don't want anyone to traumatize themselves again, but I want you to remember being in a situation that you thought was a dangerous situation. So for me, that might be I live in North Philly. Sometimes I take the train and then I walk home very late at night. It's dark. And for me, so I imagine how it felt like. What was my shoulders doing? Was it dark outside? What was I looking at? If I heard a loud noise, like what did I think? So when we're in dangerous situations, our body, when we are in situations that we think is dangerous, our body will starts to prepare us to act. It starts to fill in the gaps. It starts to change literally what we see. So this is one of the biggest insights in psych. It animates research on learned helplessness, growth mindsets. It's the premise of CBT, the most widely used form of psychotherapy in the world. Tim Wilson is an eminent social psychologist, and his thought is that all of social psych is based on the idea that our generalized expectations of situations matter. And it's very simple. We have a core belief about a situation. It impacts our appraisals within that situation. So if I have a core belief about Robert, if I think he's a bright person. When I talk to him, I'm going to fill in the gaps. If I don't quite get what he's saying, if I don't know why he said that, I'm going to just assume that he knows what he's saying, whether he knows what he's saying or not. And that will impact what I pay attention to. That will impact how I behave towards him. That will impact my emotion. That will impact my physiology. And that will have a long-term impact on our relationships. So I live in West Philly. This, like the belief that West Philly is dangerous could impact if I hear a loud bang and I interpret it as a firecracker or a gunshot, and so on and so forth. And that will have an impact on how I behave while I'm in West Philly. And these beliefs we can't get rid of. They're actually extremely important. We have goals. We go through life with goals, but life is full of ambiguity. And so a beliefs about a thing's basic qualities allows us to quickly identify what is important and what we should pay attention to. So the question that underlies all of my work is, what if we have these sorts of beliefs, these extremely basic beliefs about the world as a whole as one big place, a place that we can never ever leave? Well, if we had such beliefs, you could expect two things. One is they would likely be uniquely impactful on human behavior. And two, they would be uniquely likely to be overlooked. We wouldn't know about them and their impact. Why uniquely impactful? Well, if I see West Philly as a dangerous place and that impacts how I behave and act and think and feel while in West Philly, if you have a belief about the world as a whole as one big place, you will interpret all bangs as slightly more likely to be gunshots. You will interpret all people as less trustworthy and more suspicious, and so on and so forth. And that will have implications for your behavior and outcomes no matter where you go. The effect of these beliefs would also be overlooked because we would lose our typical way of discovering their impact. So think about this dog. This dog looks scared. Is this a neurotic dog? Is this a dispositionally fearful dog? Or is it an average dog, a normal dog that just happens to be in a place that it perceives as a dangerous place? Well, the way you would find out, of course, is you would take it out of the room. You would observe the dog in a different room. You might observe the dog outside, and this would give you insight into whether the dog is just a neurotic, anxious, fearful dog versus an average dog who happens to have certain beliefs about the situation that they're in. But if you can't do that, then you become what I call a handicapped observer, unable to determine the role of the belief. The belief should still have all those same effects, but you can't see the belief and you can't see its impact. When it comes to world beliefs, all of us are handicapped observers. I am not able to observe Robert outside of the world. And he might have the belief that the world's extremely safe and has very few threats. He might have the belief that the world is extremely dangerous with tons of threats, but I can't ever have a good sense of the role of his beliefs about this world because I can only ever observe Robert within this world. Maybe. So that's the big idea. So I wanted to zoom out. I'm sure for some of you that was a bit philosophical, but that's the big idea and why this could matter in a massive way. All right. But do people really hold these beliefs? Well, let's listen to actual people. One of the weird things about this is that people do make claims about the world as a whole as one big place a lot, and we see it across all of human history. When we first emerged to consciousness, one of the first debates that we had, the first questions that we had was, what is the nature of the world as a whole as one big place? If you remember, Heraclitus thought the world was defined by change. Pythagoras thought the world was defined by beauty. Trying to determine the overall traits of the world as a whole as one big place was the first debate in all of Western thought. That is not just an absurd claim. I recently published about this As a former philosophy major, it's the coolest paper I've published. You should all go read it. Ecclesiastes. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. This is a claim about the world as a whole as one big place. There are few things that matter. The first of the four noble truths is life is suffering. As you can tell, like hiding in plain sight are a lot of claims about the world as a whole as one big place. Wesley from The Princess Bride says something very much like this. Life is pain. My own dad-in-law was taught by his dad-in-law that life's a shit sandwich and you just took your first bite. That was like the line. Like he was wondering when me and my wife had kids if we would pass on this wisdom to our kids. We declined, but you can see how this pervades like how we think about the world and what we say. Everything is awesome. There's songs about this. There's a whole film. I've watched this film a few times with my 6-year-old. The whole film is about a witch teaching Rapunzel to stay where she is because the world is a dangerous place. She gets outside. She's scared of bushes and bunnies, but then she realized that the world isn't that bad and that she was wrong. And the last big song at the end is, "And at last I've seen the light, and it's like the sky has lifted." And a lot of the times, at moments of great enlightenment, when we understand how someone has changed in a profound way, they describe a change in a world belief, such as the case with Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. And of course, we make claims about the world as a whole at all times on not at all times, but we see it a lot on social media platforms as well. And I like to show this quote, and please forgive the swear word, but I feel like when people swear about the world as a whole as one place is when you realize, like, oh yeah, we hear this all the time. This is part of the zeitgeist, even to make claims about the world as a whole as one big place. So they appear that people state them all the time. But maybe this is just expression. Maybe this is just hyperbolic expression. I mean, it's hard to dismiss like a whole film where the motivation, the plot line is based on this discovery. But maybe a lot of this is expression. Beyond there, is there something psychologically important here? And decades of research before my time said most likely. So several, depending on how you count, about 6 of these world beliefs have been studied for decades. But the one that's by far has received the most attention was this belief called belief in a just world. And this is the belief that the world is a karmic type place where you get what you deserve and deserve what you get. To be clear, it's not a belief in karma. It's not a belief in like sin and people getting rewarded for good deeds. It's not a belief in Newton's third law, where what goes around comes around. You can come to the belief in a just world for any religious or metaphysical background. That's not belief in a just world. And some people believe the world is just and they have no religious or metaphysical basis to believe it. They just tend to assume that it's true. So the belief in a just world has been tied to many different outcomes across many different domains of life. They can be summed up in just a few buckets. So if you see the world as a just place, you tend to work hard because don't slack off. That will come back to bite you. If you see the world as a just place, don't be a jerk because that will come back to bite you. If you see the world as a just place, you will tend to work hard and you'll be nicer. That will tend to lead to more success, but also it's just more pleasant to live in a just context. Like imagine being a student in a classroom that you think is deeply unfair. It's not fun to be in that classroom. It doesn't feel good. Also, though, to be clear, just because a belief is a positive belief doesn't mean that it's in always good. So if you see the world as a just place, those people tend to blame victims. They tend to be like, oh, if you're poor, well, then there's a quickness to assume that maybe you didn't work hard. If you're sick, there's a little bit of a quickness to assume that, like, oh, maybe it's because you didn't take care of yourself, and so on and so forth. You also tend to see justice across domains. So because you approach the world with a lens that the world is a just place, you'll interpret sports outcomes as more fair. Well, the ref probably could see it better than I could. You'll tend to interpret verdicts as more fair. Well, the jury knows things that I don't, perhaps. I didn't get to see the whole thing. You'll tend to interpret grades as more fair. You go through life interpreting lots of little things as more fair. So it does appear to be a lens. And that was all true of belief in a just world research before the new interest in world beliefs. But what about the other beliefs? So all of that is a bit of prelude to this slide. I study beliefs about the world as a whole as one big place. I spent the first 5 years of my work on this trying to not come up with my own opinion of what the beliefs are, but trying to empirically derive what the major ones are. We call them primal world beliefs, or primals for short. This is a technical term. It's a belief, it's a mental representation. It's about the world as a whole as one big place, and it's a certain type of world belief. So we weren't interested in world beliefs like the world is composed of chemical elements. We're not even interested in the belief the world was made by God. That's about something that occurred in the past. We're interested in right now, what are the overarching qualities that the world has? Is it a dangerous place? Is it a beautiful place? And so on and so forth. I designed a process to systematically get a ton of different inputs to expose our research team to all the possible ways that people could conceive about the world as a whole as one big place. This process took about 18 months. It involved about 70 researchers. We looked at 80,000 tweets, most of the most influential texts in human history. Like we did tons of things to try to wrap our arms around all the different ways the world as a whole could be described. About 9 months into an 18-month process, we achieved what we call saturation. Like we couldn't find new ideas. And so we took what we found and we administered questions to represent what we found to a few thousand people. And then we used statistical tools to unearth the latent patterns that underlie the data. And I don't need to go through all of this, but we went out of our way to make sure that these beliefs we were looking at were world beliefs and not just mood, that they were world beliefs and not just stuff that has been looked at before, like optimism, because these things can feel very close to each other. And so we did all this work and we found three big things. First, humans disagree about the world as a whole as one big place in at least 26 ways. So you can think of this as 26 spectrums that we all fall on. Belief in a just world is just one of them. The next one is these beliefs are stable across time. Now, to be clear, that does not mean that they can't change, just that in practice, they typically don't change. Okay, I think that's really important. I'm going to stress to you strongly that these beliefs can be changed, and they're things that are staying the same just because we let them stay the same. Third point is that they are massively predictive of how we live our lives. So remember this slide where I was trying before, like all of these different puzzles that social science researchers are trying to solve? All these 26 beliefs are corresponding with a whole bunch of different outcomes, the way that we think they should, if they play this large role that we think that they might. So for instance, depression, the correlation between belief in a dangerous world, which again is the same thing as the belief in a safe world. It's just a spectrum from seeing the world as a dangerous place to a safe world. But dangerous world belief is strongly tied to becoming depressed. It appears to be a risk factor for depression. Seeing the world as full of beautiful and interesting things is strongly tied to well-being. It's extremely hard to experience high well-being while also thinking that the world is a fundamentally awful place. And so on and so forth. There's a ton of these things. But the same logic applies across them all. That in any situation seen as X, Y outcome or action makes more sense or becomes tactical. And any situation seems as dangerous, being on high alert, for instance, being neurotic makes sense. It makes sense to be on high alert if you're in a situation that is dangerous. It makes sense to be stressed. It makes sense to trust less. And so on and so forth across all 26 of these beliefs for dozens and dozens of different outcomes. Now, but this is just correlational research, but it's highly suggestive. And so that is why for the last 5 years, there's been this explosion in interest around world beliefs and where they come from and what they do. So that was the introduction to primals and what's going on right now. I want to talk to you a little bit more about findings and what these world beliefs are, because we haven't really gotten into that. And then we'll move on. So what are these beliefs? So we just discovered that we fundamentally disagree about this place that we're all in and never leave. Now that should immediately make us feel weird. Like if most of us were dropped into a war zone in the Ukraine, we would all agree that we're in a dangerous place. But basically what we're finding out is some people think that we're all in Ukraine and some people think that we're in like a safe recreational park somewhere. But we're all in the same world. So what are these diverse perspectives on the sort of world this is? So at one level, you can look at it that there's 22 beliefs. These are statistically separate from each other, and they all mean something a little bit different. But what's nice is that most of these 22 cluster into three broad clusters. And that's first the belief that the world is a safe place versus a dangerous place. So basically, this cluster allows you to understand what it means to see the world as safe versus dangerous. So what it means to see the world as a dangerous place is a miserable place that is prone to decline, that is full of threats, that's brutal, cutthroat, and competitive, where situations tend to fall apart and is unfair. So those are like the 7 parts of what it means to see the world as a dangerous place. The second cluster is the belief the world is enticing. So this is really the combined ideas of it's full of interesting things and beautiful things versus boring and ugly. So the blue ones are the most central to each cluster. And the third idea here is the belief the world is alive. This is the belief that what happens in life happens on purpose, and the world is interacting with you specifically and needs your help for an important task. So if I saw the world as not alive but mechanistic, I'd be like, oh, this random senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, he bumped into my work and he had these thoughts and he contacted me, and so here I am. Or you could have this belief that the world conspired to get Robert to see my work so that he would reach out to me and we could become colleagues and friends. And so I could give this talk. And so you out in the crowd could hear this news that you need to hear so you can see how like seeing the world as alive is a very positive thing. It's an agentic thing. It moves you forward. And indeed, the belief the world is safe, enticing, alive combine into one super belief that the world is a good place. And this makes sense, right? Like, is the world worth existing? Is it a privilege to be alive in the world, or is it a curse to have to live in this world? And the main reasons one has to see the world as good is it safe? Is it enticing? And is it alive? Versus is it dangerous, dull, and cold and mechanistic? I should also point out that safe and enticing are really more central than alive in terms of what is driving overall belief that the world is a good place. I like to say like safe and enticing is like the ice cream and the fudge, and alive is the sprinkles on top. So you can see the world as a very good place and not see the world as alive, but you cannot see the world as a good place and see it as a dangerous place. Okay, so let's have a bit of a lightning round just so you are exposed to what these things predict. Because what's really interesting about these beliefs is that certain primals don't perfectly cleanly, for sure, correspond to certain outcomes, but a lot of them do, and it's revealing of different worldviews that are at play. So, which primal world belief tends to protect you when bad things happen in your life. So when bad things occur in your life, you tend to get a well-being hit. Sometimes it's a short-term hit, sometimes it's a long-term hit, and there's two beliefs amongst these 26 that plays an outsized role in buffering you and protecting you from negative life events. I'll let you know. The first one is regenerative. So regenerative world belief is the belief that the world's fundamental tendency is to heal, to stabilize, to balance versus decay, fall apart, decline, right? So if something bad happens in your life, then the good times have come to an end and it's probably just going to get worse from here. And then the second one is improvable. So the only way that your life can get better if your life suddenly takes a dramatic turn for the worse is either it can get better on its own or you can make it better. But if you don't think that the world is plastic and amenable to your touch, and you think that the world tends to naturally decay and fall apart, then really when a bad thing occurs, the good times have come to an end. Oh, I think I just revealed the next one on accident, but I'll pretend that people didn't see it. So which primal explains the relationship between being religious and well-being? So for a long time, psychologists like me have known that there is a well-being benefit to being religious. And it's not massive. It's not going to suddenly make you, on average, more happy, but or a lot more happy, but it's a reliable effect. But there is a primal that, when you control for it, completely explains the relationship. I'll give you a hint. It's one of these three in the alive cluster. It's the belief that the world needs you. So belief that the world needs you is something that a lot of people who aren't religious believe. And the main well-being effect of being religious doesn't seem to occur if it doesn't correspond with also a belief that the world has a unique and important role for you specifically, Robert, or whoever it is to play. Which primal most separates the political left from right? This is one of the findings that got a ton of attention back in the day. And if you are interested in this, Google my name and Scientific American. There's a great piece about that. For a long time, people thought that liberals saw the world as a safer place and conservatives thought the world as a more dangerous place. I was suspicious of this for a long time. Because it felt a bit condescending to conservatives, even though it also seemed to be a good chance to be true. And what we found is hierarchical world belief is by far the belief that most explains where you fall on the left or the right. And just real fast, that's basically the belief that the world is full of bold, thick lines that separate things that should probably stay separate and might be better or worse than other things, versus it's all dotted lines and shades of gray. So if you think about it and you think about the issues that tend to divide the left from the right, many of them concern the meaning of a line and whether it's an important line or a silly line. And so a border is a line. Does it matter? Does it separate things that should stay separate, or is it an arbitrary line that came about through the idiosyncratic process of history? The line between the line at the center of the LGBTQ plus debate is the line between men and women. Is it a line that is important and is distinctive and is more black and white, or is this all shades of gray? The line in the abortion debate is the line about when life begins. So you can see how, like, in debate after debate on the left or right, there's a implicit debate about one side shouts, this line matters, this line matters. And one side shouts, maybe not, I don't like it, you know? And I'm excited about this finding because this finding, I get so many people on both sides of the spectrum who reach out to me saying they feel more understood. That it's not like this side are the scared people who see the world as a dangerous place and this side isn't. That it is more about a fundamental approach to an assumption behind lines. Because clearly many lines matter and many lines don't. And it just depends on what your basic assumptions tend to be. Which primal is most associated with becoming a terrorist? This is a really fun one because it's one that we did not expect. We were completely wrong. We've been wrong on a ton of these. And it's basically if you score low on the belief the world is a meaningful place. So people who are becoming a terrorist, they tend to assume that very, very few things matter in this world. So when they find something that does, I might have to blow up myself. Robert, I might have to blow you up too. But honestly, our lives don't matter that much. And the cause matters. If you find something that matters in a desert of meaning, then it is very hard for the ends not to justify the means. And this is like scary to some people because it begins to make a lot of sense. Like if very few things matter, then you're a bad person if you don't sacrifice those things that don't matter that much for this thing that clearly does. And so Daniel Snook, I want to use his name because he came up with an intervention. He used it amongst January 6th riot supporters. So not the people at the riot themselves, but people who condone the violence of the riot, and like how it went. And he did a intervention and it went across 10 days. And it was an intervention where you expose people, you have them take pictures of things in their life that are meaningful in different ways, and then you ask them at the end to reflect on all of the 9 things from the 9 days before and say, are these all of the things that matter in the world, or is this just the tip of the iceberg of things that matter? And we're very pumped up about this because it is a intervention that we've now replicated a couple times, and it impacts well-being and it impacts violent extremism intentions. And so we have people in like the State Department who are pumped up to see if we can use this on potential terrorists in prison, but you also have positive psychologists and clinicians who want to use this to increase well-being. I'm going to skip these findings. We might get back to it. But I will say this one. Seeing the world as dangerous is tied to interpreting a neutral face as more criminal, more likely have committed crimes in the past, and more likely mad at you. So when your boss comes to you in the middle of the day and is like, hey, can I talk to you in a neutral way? Do you assume that he is ticked at you and has something bad, or do you assume that it's probably fine? Dangerous world belief seems to impact that. Also, and this is a big one, people who see the world as dangerous compared to interpret all threats as about 4.2 times as high as those who see it as safe. So it varies a ton depending on what the threat is. But if you think about murder rates, getting your car stolen, being attacked by a bear across tons of different threats, people who see the world as safe estimate the threats as 4.2 times as high as those who see it as safe. And interesting subpoint, people who see the world as safe are much, much more accurate. So I'm going to skip that. Let's talk a little bit about where these beliefs come from. So far, hopefully you're like, there might be something here that's important. So they might do some of these things that he's saying, but where do they come from? Well, the big question that I get asked as a white male who is at an Ivy League school with a PhD and so forth is that a lot of my findings are out there on Twitter and whatnot. And people understandably ask me the question, well, are you just a privileged person and so you can see the world as a good place? And so we're like, that's a great question. We should look at whether seeing the world as a good place corresponds to having lived an objectively good life in a whole bunch of ways. So we identified 12 hypotheses in the middle of your screen. So Does safe world belief correspond to being male? Some people think that the world isn't objectively more safe for men than women. Does safe world belief correspond to living in a lower crime zip code? Does safe world belief correspond to not experiencing childhood trauma and adulthood trauma? Let's go to this one, abundant world belief. Do you see the world as abundant when you've also lived in a high income household or you live in a richer zip code, and so on and so forth? So we came up with all 12 of these hypotheses. We surveyed lay people and researchers to make guesses as to what they thought the relationship should be. And then we looked at what the actual relationships are. And this is a very important slide. I'm about to reveal red what people thought the relationships would be and blue what the relationships actually were. So what this should show you is that there is a meaningful and small degree, very small degree, to which seeing the world as a good place in these different ways corresponds to you having lived a good life objectively in those ways. But we tend to dramatically overestimate it. We tend to think that if you grew up rich, then I kind of know the world beliefs that you have. And if I know your world beliefs, then I have a good sense of if you grew up rich or not. And the really insane thing about these world beliefs is that is wrong. I'm waving my arms in the air. Like I had this intuition as well, and I was wrong. The results showed that if you know someone's primals, you know almost nothing about their background. And the same way, if you know someone's background in terms of their demographics, like if they're white or black or rich or poor or so on and so forth, you know almost nothing about their primals. These beliefs are independent, typically, of that stuff. Also, when the world changes, does a primal change in reaction to the world? What's nice about the pandemic is that we got to see when the world became an objectively more dangerous place, did dangerous world belief increase? And we found that it did not. I'm going to skip this for the time being, for the sake of time. But I'll let you a little bit insight on where these beliefs do seem to come from. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in just a second. But from what I can tell, primals are definitely malleable things. It's really good news that they simply don't respond to our demographic background. Robert, if you came to me and you're like, Jer, I would like to see the world as a more abundant place. And I say, Robert, you should have been raised in a wealthier household. You should consider being more wealthy. Like you should consider changing your zip code that you might be not be able to afford to do. So like it's very good news that demographics do not neatly correspond to our primals. That means that it's coming from us and our experience and our thoughts in some way. And I think the reason why they don't correspond to demographics that well is that primals don't define our in-groups or our identity. So you could consider yourself a Christian, for instance, and that doesn't mean that you see the world as a good place, and it doesn't mean that you see the world as a bad place. We typically don't debate, like we might debate things like, does God exist? We might have all these different reasons that we have come to in our thinking on that. We rarely debate things like, is the world abundant? Or is the world good? Or is the world dangerous? They're implicit beliefs. So we don't debate them. We just kind of fall into them and stay there. So my best guess is that they are beliefs that we fall into as kids, starting to see the K through 12 implications here, that we fall into as kids that are malleable but go unmolded because they are A, unidentified and impossible to falsify. So everyone who sees the world as a safe place looks both ways before they cross the street. Okay, so these are not beliefs that consign you to a certain way of functioning in the world. So you can think about it like this. Like imagine if Robert, imagine if I believed that Robert was a liar. Now that doesn't consign me to the belief that he always lies all the time. It just means that when he could lie or might be lying, I might be a bit more prone to believe it. In the same way, the belief that the world is safe is not the belief that everything is always safe. It just means that when in doubt, it might be safe to assume that it's safe. But we do know that improving your circumstances are very unlikely. Improving your objective circumstances are unlikely to change your primals, and that we will probably need separate efforts to improve our primal world beliefs. We can't just assume, well, if we help people get wealthier and we improve crime rates and so forth, that their world beliefs will change. The odds are is that it won't. So we should make the world better for all of the tons of different reasons, but we should not make the mistake of thinking that if we improve people's objective life conditions, that we will improve their primal world beliefs. And if primal world beliefs are indeed tied that close to mental health, then it's really important that we improve primal world beliefs as well. Very briefly on, how am I doing on time? Very briefly on well-being, I'll just say this. Many people think that negative primal world beliefs are good for them. I always think everything could be a trap, which is why I'm still alive, says Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride. People think that they can't see the world as a good place because that might lead them to disappointment. If I assume the worst, then I'll protect my well-being. People who think the world is a bad place tend to think that they should continue to think the world is a bad place because if they don't think the world is bad, they might not work hard to make it better. There's a ton of arguments like this, and we've looked at many of them. But one of the studies I want to point out is that we surveyed parents on the primal world beliefs that they're trying to pass on to their kids. And what we found is that many parents have the explicit goal of teaching their kid that the world is a bad place in several different ways. And many parents made the assumption that people who are successful in life and happy in life are the ones who get it. I love the line get it and understand that the world is a bad place. And so we can't look at the causality yet because this field has just began, but we did do a broad search at 6 samples, 48 professions, looking at a bunch of different outcomes, trying to find subfields or outcomes where we had some evidence that seeing the world as a bad place might be tied to good outcomes. And the bottom line is we found none. Like there is very little evidence that negative primals serve this protective function. What it tends to do is just make you less likely to come back from hardship, and in all these different ways. So effect size really matters here. So one of the biggest effects that we found, or here's a comparison to keep in mind. So in the US, the correlation between surface temperature and how far away you are from the equator, like how far north versus south you are, is an R of about 0.6. Like Florida tends to be hot, Maine tends to be cold, right? So that's a big relationship. It's one of the biggest, yeah. So the relationship between seeing the world as a good place and overall well-being is about the same size. It's just really hard to find places in Florida where it can snow. And in the same way, it's really hard to find people who see the world as forgive my French, like a shithole, that it's a curse to be here and enjoy themselves while they're here. So there's very little evidence that negative primals protect you. The correlation between seeing the world as a good place and well-being is quite large. Humperdinck is probably wrong, and parents and teachers might want to be aware of some of these findings. Last points, and then we'll move on to to discussion. So this is where I start to change from my science hat on This is what we know in science. And I am speculating about K through 12 education as someone who hasn't stepped into a K through 12 school since I was in K through 12. The first point of speculation is that I think K through 12 education is already teaching our kids world beliefs. I think that's already occurring. So the question is not which world beliefs should we teach? um, is not just should we, but which ones should we? I'm guessing that in many schools and for many teachers, the primal world beliefs that are being taught are negative. I think there's important exceptions. Any claim about K through 12 is absurdly broad. But I think that in many contexts, the primals being taught might be negative. And I think educators could, if they wanted to, and if findings warranted it, teach kids primals that could really help and could potentially stick around for a long time. Here's 7 clues about why I think this. Some of these clues are awful. For instance, my own children. N of 2. I have 2 kids. These are my 2 daughters. My oldest is 6. I'm pretty sure she popped out of the womb thinking that the world was a bad place and a dangerous place specifically. She was very risk averse. And I did several things that I think, from what I can tell, dramatically changed that. And it was really not hard. And she's not like suddenly taking a bunch of risks. Not at all. She's just not as quick to assume the worst. My second clue, and this is what I just told you, and we know this, primals don't reflect objective circumstance. And I think that teachers are probably teaching a lot of kids negative primals because a lot of parents we know are already trying to do that. So it makes sense that teachers are doing that as well. What we know so far is one big thing changes these world beliefs, and that's how we direct our attention across time. So we recently discovered the first big uh we we discovered the first naturally occurring life event that reliably changes these world beliefs. We had all these intuitions and they were all wrong. And the first one that we found is becoming a social media content moderator. So these people go from spending very little time to spending 4 to 8 hours a day looking at the most obnoxious posts on a major platform. So is this child porn? Is this being a bully? Is this hate speech? Is this so on and so forth? And they're just spending their time looking at post after post after post after post. There is a sharp drop in enticing world belief across the first 10 months of their job, and it seems to stick. This is still initial data, but we are quite uh, hopeful that follow-up studies will find this to be true. And this is a big deal because, again, their objective life conditions don't change. Only what they're paying attention to changes, right? Now, the thing is, K through 12 is an enormous attention redirection intervention. We are taking kids out of their and like out of the sandlot, and we're asking them to focus on certain things. So it's quite possible that we are asking them to focus on a range of negative and positive things, and it will matter what the balance is between those things. And that attention difference between the negative and the positive could have a dramatic impact in world beliefs across children. This isn't a job that you come to as an adult, across children, across 13 years of their formative life. We also know, and again, this is unpublished data, but we've known this for some time. We just don't have a reason to publish this paper. In a sample of about 7,000 people, that students are amongst the professions that see the world as a more negative place. The top group are CEOs. The next group is doctors, and down there at 30 is students. And I think it's hard to argue that their lives are objectively bad. There's also a correlation between seeing the world as a good place and your age. Now, this could be explained in a number of ways. The correlation is small, but it's quite possible that we're systematically educating our children into seeing the world as a bad place, and it takes them over the course of their life to come out of it. That's a speculation. We would have to explore a lot more to find out if that holds. And lastly, my own experience of K through 12 is that there can be a lot of negative content. History class is a series of wars. Robert has been educating me on trauma-informed pedagogy and a whole bunch of things that weren't around when I was a kid. I know too, I competed in sports and in band and a whole bunch of different ways. You're constantly comparing yourselves to each other in a way that in the real world you're actually not. Like at a small business, someone's an accountant, someone's a salesperson. They have independent jobs. They don't need to like compare themselves to each other all the time. So it can feel very zero sum. And also there's a tendency to not realize the extent to which there's so many arbitrary rules in school, which there needs to be. And there's like strict adherence to it, and you better do well in this safe context, because out in the real world it's going to be much worse. And so people can feel that even if they are in a good school with loving teachers, that the outer world is what they're getting prepared to go into, and it's going to be bad. It's going to be hard, right? Um, so imagine if we did studies and found out that on some of these points we were right. What could a K through 12 principal perhaps do? These are just some ideas that I put together today for you all off the top of my head, and you should see them as speculation, and not because they're good ideas, but potentially they could get your gears turning. One is, instead of just me or Robert making a broad claim about the negative content in a classroom, we should measure this somehow. We should audit lessons across maybe sixth grade social studies or something like that to see what the proportion is. Is it about 50-50 between showing you ways that across history, like women can now vote, like the good things that have occurred versus the bad things, and so on and so forth. Surely there are ways to increase the proportion of positive things about the world that we teach versus negative things, if that's what we wanted to do. One of the things that we very much could do is have explicit instruction on these world beliefs. Students are very capable of taking the primals inventory and understanding what their beliefs are. There can be discussions about which beliefs that they would like to hold. In the long run, I expect that primal world belief research will be taught in health classes as part of what it means just to cultivate mental health. I also think you can teach younger kids about these world beliefs. In fact, I have done it with my own kids. I find that young kids tend to get this implicitly, and there's already books out there that touch on this. There's this book called Most People. And it's basically a book about how some people are bad, but most people are good. Like we have to be careful because some people are bad, but most people aren't going to hurt you. So the book it shows like strangers who look scary. They still love to help people. They feel good to give you instructions as you walk down the street. They're not trying to hurt you. They're just going about their lives, living their life. You acknowledge that some people can get angry just like we all do. They can yell mean things. And sometimes the people who yell mean things or steal or something, they are bad people. But most people, and I love this slide, if you could line up all the people who want to be good and all the people who want to be bad, the good line would stretch from here to the tallest mountain. All the people in the bad line could crowd together in a dark and gloomy room. So again, we need to go through life, and you can teach kids like to take precautions. These things aren't intention. You don't have to think of everyone as awful to take precautions. In fact, that doesn't help. In fact, that leads to people overreacting and assuming the worst and causing bad outcomes. But we can teach people that most people are just friends you have not met yet. You can totally teach that while also teaching, but some people are bad. I'm going to skip that for the time being. And you can enroll parents in the outcomes. So remember, children, just like adults, we are all stuck in this world. We are all stuck here. And the only thing that we can do, the only thing that a 6-year-old can do, that a 18-year-old can do, that I can do, is decide what attitude we are going to have towards being here. Are we going to be thrilled to be here? Are we going to appreciate that we get to live in this beautiful, wondrous place? Or are we going to feel like it was a curse to have to live in this awful, awful place? All right.
Wow. First, Dr. Clifton, you are one hell of a presenter.
Oh, thank you.
This has just been the most engaging hour I've spent in a very, very long time, and I hope everybody watching us feels the same way. So, thank you, and I hope everybody who's just saw this presentation is now as jazzed about this research as I am. I mean, it just kind of was like not just a light bulb, but a lightning bolt going off in my mind when I first read about it. So thanks for bringing that to life for our viewers today. The very first audience question that got queued up here is exactly the question that I was going to ask you coming out of this. Which have you administered the primals inventory to teachers, especially those working as I used to in a high poverty school? I mean, one, have you? And if you haven't, what would you expect you would find about teacher primals?
Yeah. So surely teachers are a very broad group. I could look up, we have teachers is one of, I should have looked this up. It's on our list of professions. I don't think it was remarkable one way or the other. It wasn't near the top and it wasn't near the bottom. But I could look that up. And I think that's just because the teacher experience can vary a ton.
Okay.
But as you well know, Robert, um, there are teachers that teach in some contexts where they're exposed to such awful problems at home that they're dealing with. There might be poverty, there might be a whole bunch of things, there might be kids that act out, and you're just dealing with egregious problem after egregious problem. I do know that so I served in AmeriCorps for a couple years. And I noticed that a lot of us would, and it's similar to Teach for America to some degree. You're just like kind of thrown into certain places or the Peace Corps. And there's a lot of burnout, a lot of people wash out. And I think that I would love to administer the primals inventory before someone goes and after. So
Mine. Yep.
again, so I skipped one of the slides because I couldn't bear myself to do it, where I was going to ask the crowd to, if you know a funder who would like to fund this stuff, please put them in touch with me because we could explore all these questions, but we lack um, funding to hire someone to focus on this work. And if someone has contacts with like Teach for America or something great, like we could totally administer the primals inventory beforehand and after and see if change in the primal impacts burnout, whether they stay in the teaching profession,
Mhm.
um, and a whole bunch of how much they just enjoy the job and a whole bunch of other outcomes.
I am going to call Teach for America tomorrow morning at 9:01 a.m. Eastern time because I think we would learn so much. But your intuition is exactly mine. I would love to even partner with you on that research, and we'll talk about the funders offline. Um,
Sounds good.
uh, Talk to me about if you wanted to design an intervention. You mentioned the intervention that forgive me, I can't remember your colleague's name with the
Daniel
J.
Snook.
Thank you. If you were to design an intervention or even conceive of an intervention that might positively affect student or teacher primals, what do you think that would look like?
So that's a great question. I want to go back to this slide. Um, I just found my oldest daughter, um, all that you had to do was state the primal you wanted her to believe at different times. Like it was weirdly easy. Like I think you would do a few things in combination. One is that you would be aware of how you're redirecting attention. Um, a lot of us as parents can follow our children around, and in an effort, our job is to keep them safe, is to point out the threats that are around them. Watch out for that. Don't touch that. That's going to hurt you. And then the child can begin to see that the world is a dangerous place or a bad place. And what I did is I changed how we would go to like a playground. Like instead of going to a playground and giving them like a series of don'ts or else you'll get hurt. Like don't touch that. I live in West Philly, so I'm like, don't touch the condom that's on the that's in the grass. Like don't touch that. Don't do that. I would say things like, Tilly, that's her nickname. Tilly, this place was made for you. This ground was made to be soft. You can fall on it. You should try things that you might not want to try in other places. This is made for you. This is a safe place. But there's a couple things to watch out for. Don't cross this path, don't go to that road, and don't touch those things. And so like they can understand like this is a safe place. So that's the first thing that I would tell teachers or anyone who's just thinking about how they might do something about this. Like beware of how you redirect attention and realize that you can still protect kids without teaching them that overall the world is a dangerous place. In terms of a specific intervention, by the way, should I stop sharing my screen? Would be better for you and I
Sure.
to.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And by the way, while you're saying that, we are clearly going to go a few minutes long here. We were scheduled to go until 5. We're going to go to about 5:15, I think, so we
Okay.
can get a few more questions. But go ahead, Jared.
Um, and the other thing is that I would start to design interventions that, like the Snook interventions, involve reflection. So what the Snook intervention did is he asked um, subjects to take pictures of 3 things each day that they felt matter in different contexts. So one day you might take a picture of nature that you felt that mattered. One day you might take a picture of a person. One day you might take a picture of infrastructure. So it's these different things that matter, like a road. A road connects people and ideas. A road takes loved ones to see other loved ones. A road takes people who are sick to the doctors that can help them. How meaningful is the mundane thing that is a road? And then each night you would select one of the pictures and you would reflect on why that thing you took a picture of matters. And then at the end of 10 days, you would journal about whether are these all the things that matter in the world? Or is this the tip of the iceberg of things that matter? And we've tried other interventions, and this was the first one that we just got a crush of. Oh my goodness, the world is full of hidden things of enormous importance. You can't go anywhere without stepping on a leaf. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I had no idea. My worldview has changed. This is what they're free saying to us, not knowing about the goals of the intervention. So I think that like you could absolutely, this is not a dangerous intervention for children. You could take 5 minutes of their day to have them take a couple of pictures and or journal about something that matters, and at the end of 10 days you could tie it in a bow of what that might mean for the world.
Okay. Terrific question from one of our viewers. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Teachers realistically know far more about their students' backgrounds than their primals. Since you said primals are hidden, are teachers at risk of mischaracterizing their students' own primals based on this? For example, if a student with positive primals comes from a poor neighborhood, could a teacher try to compensate for the student's background and inadvertently lead the student to see the world in a less positive light?
Yes. Yes. So and it goes both ways. If you know the demographic background of your students and it's positive, you can assume that their primals will be positive as well. And that's simply a bad assumption to make on average. One of the really important things to remember about these beliefs is that they don't reflect our uh, demographic background. So I would encourage teachers to, it's not at all a case to dismiss backgrounds as important, but don't assume that because there's trauma in your kid's background, that that's why they see the world as a bad place or that it can't be changed. It's tempting when you see the scared neurotic dog. you can look into their past and find reasons that they should be scared and neurotic. But that may not be the thing that's driving their fear and neuroticism. It might be a belief about the situation that they're in. So even when you find someone who's a student whose demographics seem to correspond with what you think their primal should be, it may well not be because of their demographics. It may be because of something else.
Okay. Let me posit the opposite argument here, and I've seen some of this in my own work. For example, when I wrote that commentary piece that I referred to, and even yesterday, just previewing this conversation, putting a couple of posts up on social media. Those who favor a more authentic view of teaching and learning, in other words, we have to prepare, just like the parent research that you cited, we have to prepare kids for the realities of the world. Undergirding that notion is often the idea that the world is improvable, to use one of your primals. That's why, and we are in fact challenging students to take up these fights, whether it's to fight structural racism, climate change, you name it. We're not depressing children. We are inspiring them to do their part to change the world in a positive direction because we believe it's improvable. That's the argument. What's your response?
Oh, I think that some of these primals were more, some of them we are encouraging. So I think the belief that the world is improvable is probably amongst the positive primals that on average we are most likely tending to encourage in K through 12 contexts. I think that's an empirical question. But keep in mind that it's really important to see the world as a place that's worth working hard to try to improve. And so seeing the world as a beautiful place and full of beauty, as a meaningful place, as a funny place, that's a part of that cluster as well. Um, it's important to see the world in positive in multiple ways, not just one.
Great. That reminds me of a lovely, eloquent thing that you once said to me about, and I'll give you a chance to say it now, about hunting for treasure, and that
Oh, yeah.
it's not the pirates and the the crocodiles, so to speak, that keep us from exploring. It's the fear that there might not be anything worth finding.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a paper that hasn't been pu 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 published yet, but we have a lot of data to support this. Um, I was often bored in school. I have attention deficit. And so I would do my own thing. I would learn on my own. And classes I struggled with were classes that the teacher was working so hard to make it a safe place to explore. And I did not care how safe it was because I didn't see value in the content that I was trying to teach. We have data that suggests that no matter how safe someone sees the world, they will not explore it. They also have to see the world as enticing. And in fact, enticing is much more important than seeing it as safe to encourage exploratory behavior. And this makes a lot of sense to me. Like, I will brave pirates and snakes and dangers and storms to sail great distances if I have expectations that there is treasure out there to be found. But if I don't have the expectation that there is treasure buried out there in that sand, it doesn't matter how safe it is. It doesn't matter if you get rid of the snakes. It doesn't matter if you get rid of the pirates. I'm going to stay home in bed. And I think that that's something to think about as teachers, that we've taken this specific idea about attachment theory, which is really about a specific relationship to a caregiver. And we've kind of made it much more broad to be like people have to feel safe to explore. And maybe that's true in certain contexts and in certain beliefs. But when it comes to world beliefs, we do not have to see the world as safe to explore it, but we have to see the world as enticing.
Well, I said this on Twitter yesterday, and I'm going to say it again now in closing. It is not every day, if you do what those of us do in a think tank, that you get to introduce an entirely new body of work, not new to you, not new to your field, but new to us in K-12. That's a red letter day. So this has just been a particular delight to have the opportunity and the privilege to share your work with K-12 educators and policymakers. And my call now is for those listening to us to join us in this. I mean, I'm very excited by this vein of ore. I'm not a PhD psychology researcher, obviously, but my intuition is there is buried treasure out there in this sand that Jeremy Clifton is leading us toward. So I look forward to continuing this conversation in the years ahead. Jeremy Clifton, thank you very, very much for your time. And for our audience, thank you for sticking with us, and we will see you again next month.